Good morning. God bless. What is great, good, and real? I want to start off by getting my chat up right away. I should have done that prior to. I keep telling myself to remind myself to do that, and yet I still forget. Such is the conscious nature when you don't make a habit of things, ironically, which means my habit is to do it after I've turned on the live stream. In any event, I'm really excited to be on today. I'm really excited about our recent growth. I want to talk about the search for your soul, the search for your soul. I wonder what you think about when you think about that possibility. I wonder if you think about thinking about that possibility. I wonder if thinking about that possibility is something you sit with in great detail, that you choose to make a practice, or that you just consider whenever maybe life is throwing some things at you that are difficult and complex, which one could argue life is always throwing a level of difficulty and complexity at you. In any event, before we proceed any further, let me tell you how excited I am about this book. The red book, I didn't intentionally wear a red sweater, by the way, but the red book, it is, see the smile? That's how I feel about this book, but it's also terrifying. I want to title them nightmares. I've had very difficult dreams lately, complex dreams emotionally. And the last thing that gave me complex dreams in this way emotionally, while I woke up, grateful that I woke up and I was back in this reality, was the Bible. Imagine that. And the reason being, I've talked about before that the way God is portrayed is terrifying to me in the book. It just is. And from the flood to the end, it just, in any event, I digress because I don't want to move away from this. The search for your soul. Effectively, Jung starts in this way in this book. And I want to talk about what I've learned from it, why I think it might be applicable to your life, why it's applicable to mine, and how we'll use it. So I'll start by opening with why this question may or may not exist, and then we'll go into why you have to go alone. We'll talk about why you can't opt out of this and other things here. I have notes in front of me. I have about 10 different sections I want to get through. And one last thing before I open it up is, if this made it to you, whenever it made it to you, I really hope you're feeling blessed, that you are fundamentally sound physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, in your entire endeavor that is yourself and is life, because that, of course, is the attachment of the soul. So let's start here. The search for your soul, why this question exists. Now, I posted something on the channel recently about what Jung speaks relative to finding your soul, and the significance being that no one man can teach another man how to find its own soul, because the soul search is like the individuation process, specific to you and only you. Now, I think there are frameworks that help us all find our souls and open up and expand our possibilities and open up and expand our psyches and our spiritual connection and awareness. But I do think that in conjunction with this being all about you, be selfish in this way and detach the definition of selfish relative to you have to be selfish about finding yourself if you want to come to the realization of how to find yourself, especially relative to your soul. So I think in that way, this is indescribable, the way that God is indescribable. And one might surmise that when left to try to articulate what God might mean, one of the most, I think, common questions in spirituality and in life, I think at every point somebody has an inflection and a reflection around what is God and what does it mean. I'm sure just about everyone has an opinion, even if the opinion is to not believe. But God is ineffable. God is omnipotent. God is infinite. God is indescribable. He is just the brilliant and amazing unknown. Because how could you possibly explain something that is almost relatively unknown at the expansion at which God is? And left to just think very, very briefly about the abundance available to you in life, how you are configured, how your mechanisms work cognitively, how you have a spiritual connection, how everything around you is somewhat interconnected. Jung calls it the collective unconscious. There's this holographic principle that talks about non-locality. Today, we talk very openly about everything is connected, and we are to varying degrees, some very much closer than others. But if you stop for one moment and just allow yourself to be in awe about the world you live in, which is why existentially we strive so deeply for attainment. We'll get into why some of those things are complex for the soul, and not that you shouldn't attain, but there should be sort of a guide to how you attain relative to the framework around discovering your soul. But this journey is beyond language, the way God is beyond language. It is sort of an ascension, if you could fathom it in some sort of a language or visual. If you think about the consciousness and how it works and how it's stimulated, a lot of us will point to here, like the third eye, the seat. They think that's the seat of consciousness. They call that the prefrontal cortex in cognitive theory, the mind being sort of this prefrontal region, the mid region, and it's the mammalian and reptilian portions of the brain. You have functionality around your brain that is relative to emotion. The hippocampus is where that rests and resides. You have millions and millions of neurological connections. All of those things, they say cognitively in some fashion, your epigenetic and biological functionalities, your cellular level, left to even think about all those things. Like, just imagine all that happens inside of you. And we just see the skin, right? If you even take an opportunity to look at yourself, besides looking at others as yourself. In any event, I digress. But consciousness, if it rests here, things that seem to ascend and be great in this journey that's indescribable, we almost kind of look up. Why? It's above us, right? The idea that the search of the soul and the definition of God and everything that is amazing for life and abundant in anything that's describable seems to rise above us. And in that way, this journey for the soul is an ascension, but it requires a descension. It requires going back in before you can raise above your physical limitations and, of course, identify with the ineffable. So let's get into that. That's sort of why the question exists, why I think it's pertinent to our lives, why I believe it's pertinent for me, and what I'll use to help drive the conversation. Now let's talk about Jung and how he described the desert. And so Jung was about 40 when he had this inflection. And it almost feels like madness when you read it, because effectively he's talking to himself. And it's as if he's documenting his conversation. It's like a journal entry. And he's not just talking to himself, he's answering himself. But the answers come from his soul, a voice that he seems to have lost. Now, Jung says, in order for me to find my soul, I have to go out into the desert. The significance of this is, historically, for context, if you think about the elders, if you think about those who preceded us, those who might have experienced consciousness and some state of nirvana and attachment to God that is deeper at the soul level, this sort of mysticism or even alchemy or even just straight up spiritual indescribable life experiences, it begins with isolation in some capacity. So the return to yourself is the return to your soul, is the return to darkness. It's almost like a desert mentality. If you use some historical context, Moses walked out into the desert, right? After he murdered the person inside of he was royalty at that point. He saw somebody beating a slave. He killed him. He goes out because he's obviously no longer belongs. Point is, he goes to the desert. He winds up finding his people. And the story of Moses is one of the greatest stories ever written. Abraham, who is sacrificing his son, takes a trip up a mountain for like 3-4 days, right? Jesus, 40 days against the devil in the desert. Now, the significance of the desert is sort of that there's this vastness and this emptiness there. The desert, ironically, you are going into darkness in order to perceptually achieve and be a witness to the light. And the desert is like this unrelenting light. This persistent, and think about it. If you're in the desert, what's the first thing you think? It's hot. Nothing grows. There's nothing but heat there. You are exposed in the light. There is no more darkness to run through. There is no more darkness to run to. But yet you are seeking the light. But at this juncture, one could surmise it is pure emptiness being scorched by the light. So what is in your desert? That has to be a natural question. What is in your darkness that you are seeking to persist and insist towards and stretch towards the light? I think also the desert relative isn't geography. Of course, it's a psychic sort of solitude. I can be alone in a place to start thinking about what my soul might have already been exposed to based on what I've already done without my soul. You get what I'm saying? So the idea that you need to return back to your soul also implies you've detached from your soul, and your soul in that way is what? Is it frustrated? You can and ask yourself a simple question about life today. Where are you today? How are you feeling? What is your relational experience to life, to your thoughts, to how you feel about yourself, to how you think about yourself, to how you behave about yourself? And then if you consider how I behave and how I think, if those deviate too far from one another, the soul knows that at some juncture, there's sort of a lie being built up between who you say you are and who you think you are, or who you think you are and who you say you are. Consider that as possibility. That's how we get to the idea of truth. What is truth? Well, in the desert, there's nothing left but the truth. And so in this way, your psyche, which consists of many things, if we consider leveraging Jung in this way, the quaternary, which consists of the anima, the shadow, the self, and the ego. All those things functioning, all those things operating, all those things impacting, all those things attached to a soul, we think thereby have created the soul, whereas the soul was already always present, always there, always emanating, the way God is, I think, at least. And so now you're left to sort of reflect on that. Where have I been from an ego stance, from a shadow stance? Have I been ignoring the anima that exists, the mandala, the quaternary, the possibility that psychically, from a psychiatric perspective, your psyche, have you visited it lately? Have you been to the desert? What is growing there? It could be nothing. And now the question then becomes, do you need to grow something there? Do you need to find water? Do you need to find a way to enlighten yourself? But you're already in the light. And a lot of what Jung goes into, make sure I don't have a reference point here that could be pertinent. He does say that you should think to yourself and say to yourself, the life that I could still live, I should live, and the thoughts that I could still think, I should think. The life that I could still live, I should live, and the thoughts that I could still think, I should think. That opens up your desert for you. Because it's likely that the life that you've been living and the things that you've been thinking have created a vast emptiness for you. Consider that. That brings me to a possibility with Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard effectively said you don't get to opt out. One of the endings of his book, I think it wasn't Fear and Trembling, Sickness Unto Death. He ends it almost abruptly, like you're waiting for the book to continue on another 400 pages, with something along the lines of, everyone must have an opinion of Christ. And I run from that myself personally. I run from the possibility of, am I streaming? I'm streaming. Okay. I apologize for that. I don't want to lose my train of thought here. Whether or not you agree with a religion, a book, or a following, you can't ignore Christ. And the idea that possibly Christ lived the most God-driven life you could possibly have lived, and he was sacrificed for it. You ever consider that in that way, life is one continuous sacrifice, and the returning of the soul, identifying with who you really are, is in that way sacrificial? And that you must sacrifice yourself? What does that take? I'm sorry about that. What does that take? It takes a lot of isolation. It takes a lot of self-work. It takes a lot of watching of your thoughts, understanding of your thoughts, detaching and reattaching, understanding what you feel like choosing and what you don't feel like choosing. Understand what you feel and what you don't feel. Understand what's relevant to how you think you want to live and how you think you don't want to live. And in that way, we're going to get into what Jung said about this, because I think this is important. Jung says, let me get the page. I want to read this without. Okay. Jung says, you should be he himself, not Christians, but Christ. Otherwise, you will be no use to the coming God. You should mock yourself and rise above this. If you have still not learned that this from the old holy books, then go there, drink the blood and eat the flesh of him who was mocked and tormented for the sake of our sins, so that you totally become his nature. Deny his being apart from you. You should be he himself, not Christians, but Christ. And the return to the soul and the return to the thinking of who you could be and living as you want to live for yourself becomes a mockery. And if you've ever sat with yourself long enough to consider what you may or may not be thinking, what you may or may not be creating, how you are a creator, how you are in the image of the most infinite and omnipotent possibility available to us in this reality, then you run the risk of creating an identity that believes it's already been saved. You also created an identity that is unable to mock himself and not take himself too seriously, while knowing you should take yourself very seriously. And that he who takes himself seriously is serious about himself at all times. And it's never clouded with any other thoughts or existential possibilities or natures that exist that are quote unquote sin derived. Coveting and jealousy and competition and critiquing and opinions. I read something recently too. Who are we to actually decide who is sick and who is not? Who is right and who is wrong? But at the same time, you must choose your morals, your values, your ethics, and do them for that reason. That you have considered that it is ethical enough, moral enough, and valuable enough to me. Existentially, it's irrelevant to how I feel and how I move. But could you not consider that Christ himself mocked himself in the process? How difficult and complex was it to go through that crucifixion? How difficult and complex was it to speak what he believed, even if he believed he was God? I just put this out. I am God. We are all God. I believe that deeply. But if you can insist and persist past that constant mental battle between what you are thinking constantly, how it may not align with what you want to think, but you're still thinking those things, there's a desert for you. You got to walk that alone. Which brings us sort of into our next phrase, which is each man must go his own way. The framework, I think, is really pertinent to the conversation to understand spiritually, cognitively, psychologically, all that is available to us and how it impacts how we choose to make decisions and not make decisions. I sum it up constantly to consciousness. We can think about it being the image of God in all of us. What does that consist of? There is an emotional experience. You have to be in tune constantly with what you are feeling, what you are thinking, how you are experiencing these things, whether or not you're trying to reprogram your subconscious around manifesting new realities for yourself, laws of attraction, any sort of law of the universe, law of detachment, mirror principles. There are varying degrees to which you can adopt a philosophy and a principle. Someone challenged me the other day on the channel, listening to certain frequencies, where I challenge you towards silence as much as possible. And I can't help but surmise that left to silence, that is the only way to truly confront yourself. how else could you truly understand what you are thinking at the level to which you are thinking and why you are thinking the things you are thinking? Why is that significant? I think as you go your own way, you'll learn that there's an impulse to think, an impulse to react, an impulse to behave, an impulse to chase. That is very reactionary. That is, dare I say, immature in the spiritual space, in the sense that the impulse is already completed thoughts and knowings. So if you continue to do what you believe you already know, you leave yourself closed off to the unknown. So yes, I know certain frameworks will align me with the life I want to live and lead, but I have to be open to other things I don't yet know, which is why your way needs to be your way, and you learn your things along the way. You make adjustments, you make constant modifications to how you think, how you move, how you behave, how you interact, whether it's how you pray, how you work out, how you have conversations, how you walk the streets, how you choose to vibrate your energy, how you choose to engage and not engage, how you choose to surface, how you choose to seek solitude. All those things are available to you. Some may apply, all may apply, none may apply. You may just have to go figure that out for yourself. But the idea is that you must go your own way. Now, there's ancient sort of work around the framework with why I believe consciousness is so big relative to language. At first, there was the word, right? Ultimately, you are orienting consciously around your words. And your words, a lot of times, are thoughts that don't ever manifest itself into spoken truth, whether you believe that the truth is only spoken. But you certainly are orienting around who you think you are. And you can't lie to yourself about that. That's why I talk about consciously and subconsciously. They talk about these things aren't really relevant to the emotional experience. Well, how do you become unconscious and subconscious and habitual about what you do? You have to first have an emotional experience. No other functions of life operate in any way that allow you to be sort of attracting and flowing and vibrating without first coming to a realization of how you want to attract, what you want to attract, and how you want to vibrate based on how you are feeling. You're like, no, it's how I am thinking. How do you know what you are thinking and what you want to do? You have to have a feeling attached to it. A simple analogy that really helps us be objective about this, the subjective, objective nature. You might think logically, if there's data to suggest, well, I need more information. The information tells me to do this. 80% of people who do this are successful. 20% who go the opposite way are unsuccessful. Then you're like, well, I chose logically and objectively. 80% of people did this. How do you think that 80% came to fruition? There was 0% at some point. Somebody thought about it, did it, was successful, taught it. Other people became successful off of it, relatively speaking. So you think you're not doing it without feeling, but your feeling is to attach a feeling of confidence, a feeling of knowing to what others had already known. Because I asked you this, what happens when something's 50-50? You do this, this might happen. Do this, that might happen. And the odds of each happening are 50-50. They're equal. It's a coin flip. How do you make a decision? You intuit? Oh, I'm intuitive that way. I know. What is that? Feeling. Why? Consciously and subconsciously and unconsciously, there are so many things you've done over the course of your life. We have 280 quintillion, I think, bits of data over the course of our life stored. You have so much information in memory, you can't even remember the things you remember. You've forgotten more than you remember. But they come out when you make decisions. Why? Because at some point you felt the way about it. So the framework around identifying who am I, where is my soul, is identifying how do you think you want to feel. It's not happiness. Maybe you could tie it into fulfillment. Maybe you can tie it into discovery. Maybe you can tie it into God. There is this unknowing still. But at some juncture, you have to orient around consciously, contextually, an overarching premise and goal for your life. That gives it structure. I want to live my life how I think I want to live my life. And this is how I think I want to live my life. You have to scrub it against, do I need validation? I do that regularly. Am I doing this for validation? What does that mean? If I post this and I get no views, will I still post again? If I work out, but nobody sees the development, will I continue doing it? Is the validation existential, external, or is it internal? Do I strive for things because it'll make me feel better about how I'm moving towards my God-lived life? Then one could argue you're on the path of where you should be. But if that life is persistent around how others think of how I'm thinking about how I might be thinking about living my life, then I question, how are you thinking about living your life? Because the framework comes back to, are you orienting around your soul, the image afforded to you that will allow for the expansion of your life at all times if you persist genuinely towards the value of your life that you assign to it? Which is where I also believe sort of the science stops, right? I think there are questions logic can't touch. I wrote this down. Meaning, suffering, conscientiousness, identity, right? You can only know but so much about what cognitively happens with your working memory, your short-term memory, your long-term memory, deep work, focus, all those things that are allotted to you through the framework of what exists to you, through the varying degrees of what exists to you, to allow you to be efficient with your life in how you work, how you learn, how you expand, and how you contribute so that you are rewarded for your contributions, right? But back to sort of living like Christ, there was a clear objective that he was willing to sacrifice himself for. I don't know how to give you meaning for that. I don't know how anyone gives you meaning for that. Science can't give you meaning for that. You just understand there's a meaning to it for you. But how do you find that meaning? You got to go to the desert. You got to open up to your soul. You got to listen to what you are trying to tell yourself based on what you are trying to tell yourself. And one of the first things you realize when you're trying to tell yourself some things is it really you that's telling you that? Or is it you that's telling you things that were learned by other things who told you things that you think are your things to think, but were really handed to you? Inheritance. That's how generational curses persist and insist. Consciously, you were handed a framework. Have you ever stopped to consider what that means for you? And if that's the meaning you want for yourself? You can't really identify that through any book. I don't know how powerful it could be that a man whose contribution to life was predicated off of his ability to help heal the psyche, the thinking, the feeling, the emotional experience of people, to come to a realization that none of that was quite fulfilling for him. That in that journey of trying to help because he believed that man was worth helping, he lost himself. So he went to seek meaning again. Where's your soul? Where's your soul? Which really brings me to the idea of watching the watcher. The possibility that you are your witness, right? If you can start noticing what you think about, if you can really start noticing what you think about, if you can start seeing how what you think about impacts how you behave and how you perform, then I can't help but surmise that you begin to sort of have this hierarchy where you are managing yourself, where you are identifying how you like to be managed, how you like to be spoken to, how you like to be treated, how you like to feel. And so in that way, the conclusion then becomes, well, how do I pivot my thinking and my watching to ensure that I'm always aligning with what I think I should be aligning with? Because you can't cease thinking. You can't cease behaving. You can't cease identifying. You can't cease interacting. And nobody realistically wants to cease life. So, how do you become your own watcher? How would you want to watch what you're watching? How do you have that form? Who are you really? What is in your soul, right? Now, I think all of this is pertinent. If we think about the do you cycle, disrupt, own, yield, observe, unleash. I think the biggest takeaway is simple, right? Your journey can't be copied. Disrupt that off the rip. You should endeavor out to enlighten yourself as much as possible. Give yourself as much experience and interaction with others who have done things that precede us. One of the things Jung says in here too is think about what the ancients soar. Think about how kingdoms have been disrupted and collapsed, how power has changed hands, how we have endeavored out to be dominant in varying degrees, only to watch others dominate and sort of the cyclical nature of life continue. I think along the way, disrupting the reality that this is your journey only is significant, which leads into owning that. Own the fact that it is your journey. Own the fact that it is only you who can watch you to the degree that you really want to be watched relative to how your soul is being developed. Yo, what's good, Rusty? What's good, my G? We're about to bring this to a close, man. We're talking about the soul. I showed this a bit earlier. Yo, man. Good to see you too, brother. It's good to hear from you. Imagine, right? Consciously, I see Rusty and I get a feeling and a sensation because of how we interact. That's how life works, right? But the journey is for you only. The journey to your soul, the journey towards the life you want to live for you, how you want to live for you, the way you want to live it, how you want to validate, fulfill, and accomplish. It's all for you. You own that by becoming your own watcher, holding yourself accountable, setting boundaries for yourself. I think before you start to set boundaries outside of yourself, you learn to set boundaries internally. I don't cross the line with myself. I always tell myself the truth. What's that Scarface line? I always tell the truth, even when I lie. But I've learned that some of the things I think are lies, not because they are, but because I choose not to accept them as truth. That I can't dilute that or elude them. They are there. They're for me to own or not. And I own the process that this is my journey and how I want to think is how I want to think. And when things come in that I don't necessarily wish to subscribe to, I just watch them. They're mine. It doesn't make me lesser. It doesn't make me more. It just makes me human. It means my soul is trying to contribute. All the parts of my psyche are trying to contribute. My consciousness is being impacted. Those are good things. You want that to happen. Then you want to yield along the journey of becoming you for you, along the journey of living you how you want to live you, regardless of what man thinks of you, but that keeps you aligned with the God version of you that you choose to emanate. Yield the idea that it's going to come and happen overnight. Yield the idea that it's not going to be painful. Yield the idea that science or logic or math can help explain what you are experiencing. It can't. The way God is, indescribable, ineffable, omnipresent, omnipotent, unknown, so is the journey. Yield to that. Yield to that desire to want to control things and know that the only thing you can control is being present for yourself. They talk about 10 toes down, right? Where are you at right now? What are you thinking right now? What are you feeling right now? Why are you feeling this? Why are you where you're at right now? Do you need to be there? Can you yield the life you have now and make a pivot? I saw a commercial that was really inspiring to me, and it was really simple. It was a question, and it hit me deep because I've been through this. There was a family, a father with his daughter, and the mother was rushing home, and she would rush home. Did I make it? And the father's like, nah. And she go in the room and the daughter's sleeping. She rushed home the next day. Did I make it? Nope. The daughter's sleeping. So she goes online, she finds a new apartment, and instead of coming home at night, she comes home in the light. All these things are conscious about darkness and light, darkness and light. If you want to get out of the dark, you got to show yourself some light. Yield the reality, though, that darkness doesn't need to persist. It needs to be there. You wouldn't know the difference. But she made a pivot. She got a different apartment. She stopped accepting her terms. Now she gets home in time to see her daughter before she goes to sleep. Those are insignificant. That didn't win you the lotto. That didn't make you rich monetarily, but you're all of a sudden present for your life. It's better than being unpresent. So yield that nonsense. Then you want to observe. I really think all good, Rusty. Get ready for work. Have a blessed day at work, man, and do your thing. Exceed expectations like always, man. I always say that to myself before I clock in. What is my job? Be better than what's required because, it sets a standard for who I believe I am. Observe. So as you're, yielding and owning and disrupting, continuing to study yourself. Observe. When you can observe what changes in you, observe what changes around you most intimately. If everything is collective and everything is connected, Your most intimate connections, how are they changing? The ones that stretch a little bit further, how are those changing? Your relationship to God, how is that changing? Observe it. Take notes. Don't let it become so conscious that it's subconsciously done and you lose the emotional attachment to it. Revisit your emotional experience. Observe how you may or may not be feeling. Change it if you want to change it. Observe what it's doing to you in and around your world. And then unleash. The journey for your soul, the journey for you, the journey for everything you could do to make this an experience worth living for you is only definable by you. So unleash in a way that feels fearful, unleash in a way that's uncomfortable. That's how you know it's consciously worth it. Without that conscious interference, you can't build up all the subconscious or unconscious or laws of attraction or God frequencies to attract what it is you're looking for. You got to change your rhythm consciously. The only way to change your consciousness is to come to consciousness as much as you can come to consciousness. And the data suggests that only 5% of your life is conscious. The other 95% is subconscious, which is a lot, of course, derived by this unconscious. I'm going to talk about that another day. But my challenge to you is if you're only 5% conscious, unleash coming to consciousness, not when you get into a fight with your significant other, not when your boss is frustrating you, not when you're mad at your paycheck, not when the bills come piling in, not when you realize God's not answering your prayers, not to get on the phone with your crew and complain and complain and complain and do nothing. Why? You're building up conscious emotional rhythms to only awaken and only show yourself light when things are frustrating. Stay frustrated. But frustrate yourself by waking up earlier. Frustrate yourself by deciding to pray. Frustrate yourself by sitting down with your significant other and instead of just ignoring or deciding to try to fight through something to get through it and go into silence, open up and just say, yo, listen, I'm not feeling this right now. The way we've been behaving, the way we've been acting, the way we've been speaking, I'm not rocking with it anymore. And I'm not saying it's all you. I'm not saying it's all me. I'm just saying I want to come to consciousness that I think we need to change some things. When you're talking to your crew and you realize, yo, we're a little behind, things that are not where they should be, yo, let's talk about, how do we fix this? If you got a crew of people that's on the same wavelength of you, use it to emanate greater frequencies and vibes of how to bring solutions to life. You might even think that if you could record those conversations and share them with the world, that might help somebody. That may not be a thing. Fine. Help yourself some way besides just going through a conversation that makes you feel drained and nothing has been accomplished except for you consciously realizing, damn, I'm frustrated with my life. Because if you only do that for 5%, all you're unleashing in your rhythms and patterns and habits is more frustration. And God will honor you at all times. God says free will. God is not going to intervene and tell you, yo, I think you're doing this wrong. God is like, I gave you all the faculties you need. I gave you all the components you need. The environment may not be the most ideal, but you have what you need. This is what you're choosing to do with it. All right, cool. I'll make sure you're safe and guiding you through it. All your guardian angels are carrying you through your day, exactly how you're choosing to live your day. So unleash something different. Nothing will change if nothing changes, right? So that's what I got for you today. I'll close very succinctly by saying, there's no way to summarize this for you. Your journey cannot be copied. Own that. It's a beautiful thing. Scary, lonely, isolating, but I don't know any other way to encourage you to do it. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich. Yo, Rusty, stay blessed, my brother. Stay blessed. Stay blessed.